It means that this side of the triangle is fixed. You cannot go faster or slower. It's fixed. You now have, as a filmmaker, you have to play around with your aperture and your ISO and the choices you will have to make in regards to your lighting and your software. Am I shooting at night? Can I shoot the scene in the morning? Can I shoot the scene in another room? Do I have another light that I can use? Is there a lamp that I can add to the scene? Do I open my curtains? Do I close my curtains? Because your shutter now is controlled. You can control like the opening of the lens, the aperture, and the sensitivity of the sensor, which is the ISO, and the external lighting. But you can and sometimes cannot control. All right. Um, all right. I'm ready for some Q&A. We've got another 10 minutes. You want to go to any questions before we jump into writing, or whenever you're ready, you can jump. Any questions? Anything that is not clear that you'd like me to go through again or explain quickly?
Please ask questions. You'll be required to use good lighting during your film production. Remember that the aim for this is to make sure that you create the project for the festival. Lighting is a very important part of filmmaking. Whatever you don't understand now, please ask so that you'll be able to get a good picture.
Hello.
Hi, Awa.
Hello, good
Hello?
morning. My question is that most of the mobile device that we have now, we don't see all these settings. So how are we going to do it without these settings? For instance, for me now, I'm an editor. I can shoot something with my phone and edit it and edit the setting on Premiere, Adobe Premiere uh, editing suite. So when somebody do not have this, is not an editor, how how am I going to do these settings? Because most of the camera now, they don't have all these settings. You can only shoot, if you go to the setting, you will not see the bumpers and the every. So how are we going to do it with our mobiles?
Thank you. Well, it depends on your mobile phone and it depends on the software. So, for example, there's something called Filmic Pro that I would suggest you guys try it. It actually allows you to change everything we talked about here. So it allows you to control your shutter, control your aperture, control your ISO. For example, I have an older Samsung S9, which is within the native camera software on my phone has a Pro mode, and that Pro mode allows me to change everything from my aperture, my white balance, my ISO, etc. So some phones work and some phones don't. If your phone does not allow you to make any changes, don't worry about it now. It doesn't matter now. If your phone can shoot video, that's okay. Keep this information in the back of your head. You can go back to it later when you have software that allows you to make changes, or when you have another camera that gives you the ability to make those changes. So if your phone doesn't allow you to make those changes, that's fine. It's not a big deal. It still can shoot video, and that's what matters now. If your phone does make those changes, it will give you more creative control. You can make some adjustments to your image that will as a filmmaker, will allow you to control how the image looks like, what the image looks like.
Okay. So
Thank you. All right. Any questions before I jump
I
into
see,
lighting?
I see some questions in the chat box. Can you can you see the chat box? Okay, let me just read it out to you. Ijoma is asking, please could you throw more light on the use of ISO? And Ella is asking, how can we set the aperture, shutter, and ISO in our phone?
So let's go back to ISO and I'll cover it, but I would like more questions of it. I'll explain it, but if it's not enough, please stop me and tell me if there's something else. So ISO is basically a way to describe how sensitive your camera is to light. So in the old days, you used to go by a negative, and that negative had its own built-in sensitivity. So let's take two films. One has a ISO of 800, and another has an ISO of 400. So two films, two negatives, 800 and 400. If I put both in the light in the same situation for the same duration and the same aperture, the one with ISO 800 will capture twice as much light as the negative with ISO 200. basically it describes how much light the sensor is absorbing and how sensitive it is. And the higher the number, the more sensitive it is. The lower the number, the less sensitive. If you're shooting at night and you don't have enough light, you have to have high sensitivity in order to capture as much light as you can. If you're shooting in the daylight, you're shooting in the morning, you're shooting outdoors, you've got a lot of light, the sun is quite strong. You don't really have to close your eyes, so ISO can be very good. Another thing that ISO changes is how grainy the image and how much noise you get in the image. Noise is not a good thing. Noise is a bad thing. You don't want a lot of noise in it. The more noise, the more distracting it's going to look like. The more amateurish your image is going to look. If you've seen any movies, a Hollywood movie shot at night, the image is well lit, there's enough light, it still looks like it's shot at night. You can see some moonlight coming from an angle, etc., etc. But you don't really see any grain, you don't really see any noise in it. But if you see an image shot with someone who shooting at night and shooting at a high ISO, shooting with a small camera, for example, a mobile phone, you can get to see the noise, especially when you put the projector in a large screen, whether it's a laptop or a TV or whatever. You can see noise. As you can see on the example on the right, all these white dots is a representation of how much noise there is. I can share some examples to show you what noise looks like. Because it's not pleasant. It doesn't really look authentic. You got these black and white dots in the image that is not real. That has nothing to do with the actual image. And it doesn't really look good to the eye. Was that clear, or would you like me to explain, answer anything specifically also?
It's clear, sir.
All right. The other question was regarding how to control those three things, and I would suggest Filmic Pro. I can also share with you some other suggestions offline if you like, with the groups. Some are available, some you will have to purchase, so it depends on what is available for you. But Filmic Pro is one of the things that is very good. There's a trial version of it that you can download and try. It actually gives you all sorts of controls you have. If you've got something like some of the Samsungs, for example, their native software allows you to change aperture and shutter and ISO. But again, final word is, don't worry about it, you can change it. If it's something that gives you more control, it is something that you will need to learn when you shoot movies after that. But if you can't control your shutter ISO or aperture, that's absolutely fine. Just shoot. Just shoot your video, control the light, have a look at the image. If it's satisfactory, that's more than enough. Okay? I will move to. Sorry, Sandra. Are there any other questions in the chat? Sorry, I cannot see the chat on the screen. If there are no more questions, I'm happy to like.
No more questions.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll jump into lighting. Basically, lighting is a very, very big topic. There are, experts out there. There's a whole dedicated team in every film crew. You've got the director of photography. You've got the first AC, second AC. You've got the cameraman. There's a whole huge crew, gaffers, of course, that manages lighting on a set. But we need to understand the basics. The basics are the same, and how to use this language and how to look for light and lighting situations. Mobile filmmaking festival will be relying mainly on natural light, and that's okay. You don't really have to have anything sophisticated. I will teach you in this class. We're going to cover some bits and pieces that will allow you to look at the light, figure out where it's going, and also use some easy techniques to control it. Now, there is something we also need to learn, which is called color temperature. This is going to sound very technical, but it's very simple. It's basically the color of the light. The color changes depending on the source of the light, and even depending on the time of day. So if the light is towards the orange side, it's called warm, and that's like a flame or a candle or an incandescent, etc., etc. Those look very orange. On the other side, there is things like near to sky, like an LCD screen or CXL screen, like using a TV as a source, etc., etc. And those look a lot more blue. Somewhere in the middle, your light looks white, like it doesn't really look like it has any color. And if you're light color changes during the day, and it is something that you just need to be aware of. And it's something that you also need to be aware of when you're actually adding sources of light to your image. Let's say you're shooting with your mobile phone indoors, midday, shooting with subject standing next to a window, and it's midday. Midday, the light looks like it's white. It's not really blue or orange. Looks around white, like doesn't really have a color. If you want to add more light to the image, more light to the scene, you'll be thinking, okay, maybe I should get another lamp to put it in. But if that lamp is orange and the light coming from outside is white, it might not give you the look, but it might. It just depends. But you have to train your eye to look for these colors. Look at the light source. Look at the lamps that are in your house. Look at the ceiling fixtures. Look at lampposts when you're walking down the street at night, and try to figure out what color are they on. Are they on the orange side or the blue side or somewhere in the middle? A candle has a very different light to a tungsten source, has a different light to the sun middle of the day. Just need to be aware of these variations. Since we'll be using natural light primarily, there are two times of the day that light is almost perfect. It's called the golden hour and the blue hour. When the sun is going up and when the sun is going down. Usually, most people avoid shooting in the middle of the day because the sun is really high up, the light is very strong, it's creating a lot of shadows, it looks really bright, there's a lot of contrast, there's a lot of bright areas and really, really dark areas, and it's very hard to shoot in the middle of the day. But if you're shooting at the beginning of the day around sunrise, or around sunset, so golden hour is basically the first and last hour of sunlight in the day. So as soon as the sun starts to rise, for approximately 45 minutes to an hour, that's called golden hour. As you can see, the light looks relatively on the orange side. It looks like it's dispersed and diffused. It doesn't really look too strong or too harsh. It has a very soft feeling to it. The time before sunrise is called the blue hour. The light is a little bit blue. The same with sunset. The hour before sunset is still also golden because the sun is very low in the sky. And after the sun goes below the horizon, we've got a 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, of blue light. So back again to my previous image. You can see on the left, there's a sunrise. It's looking orangey. It's soft. It's easy to shoot in. As soon as it goes into midday, it can get very, very bright, and it's going to cast a lot of shadows and it's going to be hard for you to control. When it drops again towards the afternoon and sunset, the light gets softer again and orangey and milky. So there is another software that I will suggest. It's free. It's called Photo Time, and I will send that in our groups. So is there anything in the chat? Sorry, I still can't see it.
None in the chat box.
All right.
Please, if you have a question, unmute your mic and ask.
All right. Next is what we call practical. It's just a phrase that the cinema industry uses to mean an artificial source of light that is in within the frame. So if you're using a lamp and that lamp is shown in the frame when you're capturing your video, that's called a practical. And there's a lot of details around that. I don't really want to use it, but it is something you can include in your image. When you're capturing the video, you can include an existing lamp, you can include a candle, whatever you need, whatever you have. If you want to show it in the frame, that's called a practical. That is meant to be part of it. If you're using it but it's outside the frame, the audience cannot see it, it is lighting the scene but it's not shown, that's not called a practical. That's just called art.
Hi, Ahmed.
And yes.
Please, someone is asking the name of the software you called.
I'll type it in the chat after we're done. It's called Filmic Pro.
Okay.
Filmic Pro. I'll type it in the chat as soon as I talk to you.
Okay.
You can see right now. Yes. Right. Now, another concept that we need to look for, and this is something we need to train our eye for, and this is very important when you're shooting your movie, to make sure it does not look amateurish. Make sure that it looks pleasing to the eye and it's professionally done. And it's called contrast and hard and soft light. So if you look at the image on the right, this man on the right, look at on the man's face. The left side of his face, or the right side to us, is actually well lit. The left side is darker, but the difference between the right side and the left side, or the lighter side and the darker side, is not huge. It's actually small. The transition from light The dark is actually very slow and very gradual. If you look at the other image that has hard light under it, as you can see on the right, on the left side of his face, it's a very bright, and on the left side of his face, it's really, really dark. And the transition is very quick, and the contrast is very hard. This is what we call the hard line, and this is something you have to look for when you're shooting. If your subject is in a very bright under a very bright source, and that source is small, it's going to look the light quality is going to be very hard, and it's going to look like the image on the left. It's not going to look very pleasing to the eye. The shadows are going to look very strong. As you can see, the shadows in the back are also very strong. His nose is casting a shadow. The left side of his face is actually really bright. There's shadows under his chin. It's not very pleasing to the eye. But the image on the right, even though the left side of his face is lit, the right side of his face is darker, but the transition is gradual. The contrast is not very high, and it doesn't look distracting. It looks soft. It looks pleasing to the eye. The same with the example on the left. This lady on the left and the right. For example, the image on the left with hard light under it, she's wearing the one where she's wearing blue, is being shot in potentially, I think it's probably shot midday, where the sun is really high up. As you can see, the top side of her face and her head is very bright, but there's a lot of shadows under her nose, a lot of shadows under her chin, and a lot of shadows under her eyes, because the light is coming from above, and it's very strong, and it's very hot. On the right side, there's the soft image. As you can see, the contrast is very pleasing. There's really no hard shadows under her chin or her nose. There are some shadows, but the transition from the light to dark is very smooth and very bright. Right. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Which is preferable? I know that some films use the hard lights. I think mostly epic films use hard lights, and comedy use soft light. How do I tell which? I don't know. I'm just preempting. Am I correct? And is there any bad lighting and good lighting?
Well, good lighting and bad lighting is definitely subjective. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. So, if you, for example, are shooting a scene where the subject is being abducted and is getting interviewed, tied up to a chair in someone's basement, then using hard light might be more appropriate. So, you want to give the effect that this person is being stuck in a room. There's only one light above them, and it's really hard, and they're being tied up to a chair. They're being tortured or whatever it is. Having some hard light in the room would give that effect, would add to that. The same with, for example, comedy is known to have very little shadow, so there's soft light all over the scene. And a lot of TV um, comedy shows like like Friends or something, whatever, you'll see that the scene is well lit everywhere. There's very little shadow, and that is also intentional. So it actually depends on what you're trying to achieve. But definitely, hard light is something that you would typically want to avoid unless you're really going for that. Soft light and the transition between light and dark has to be gradual. It can be less gradual or more gradual, but going for something this very hard like that definitely does not really look very good. So to answer the question, most movies go for something softer, but the softness changes depending on what type of image it is.
Okay.
So some movies like to go for a darker movie look where one person's side of the face is lit and the other side is relatively darker. But the shadows is never going to be this hard, and it's never going to be this clear. And I'll show you some examples again. Right. I wanted to show you a video that explains what diffusion is, and this will probably be something we can play around with after the presentation. Since we will be shooting using natural light, relying on the sun, and potentially other light sources that we have within our reach, whether it's a lamp or a candle or whatever we have at home, um, you can use some easy tricks to make the light a lot softer. And you don't really have to buy anything expensive. You could do anything from a white bed sheet, a shower curtain, whatever it is you have access to, will make a huge change to your life. I will attempt to play a video. Please let me know when. Can you see a video? I haven't played it yet. Can you see another tab with a video?
Yes, it's
Yes, we can. All right. Okay, I'll play. Sorry? So someone was saying that?
please just carry on.
No? All right.
Fuse light or soft light is one of the easiest ways to help achieve a film with. It's a straightforward technique that you can use to help reduce these hard shadows. So in this episode, we're going to talk about some cheap diffusion methods that you can use. Welcome to the Filmic. One of the main lights we use here at the Filmic are a set of 800 watt lights. They're super bright and you can even dim them. The problem is, they produce a very powerful hard light. So when I first bought these lights, I knew straight away I needed to soften the light. As you can see, it's pretty harsh on me by now. What you normally do is buy diffusion paper, which is really expensive for what you get. So I need to find something that was a fraction of the price. So I thought, easy, printer paper. I have loads of it. The light can shine through it, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. But wait, those 800 watt lights get hot, really hot. We even have to wear gloves when touching the light when it's on. So sticking paper in front of them was playing with fire really quickly. What I needed was something cheap, easy to get, but something that would withstand a lot of heat. My solution was greaseproof paper. It's made to be used in the oven, so it's perfect. I picked up a roll for £1. Then I cut it to size and taped it to the lights. If you have to replace it, it only costs pennies. So how well does the greaseproof paper work? Well, I'm currently being lit by that same 800 watt light as earlier, but now it has the paper on it. So let's have a look at a comparison with and without. This is in with, and this is without. Next we have a set of can lights which hold household bulbs. This one's currently got 70 watts in it. Let's see a comparison between with the diffusion and without. And finally, our 160 LEDs. Another way to use it is to cover windows in your scene. If you have a bright direct sunlight coming through, it can sometimes give you trouble in terms of dynamic range and exposure. If your window is out of frame or out of focus, you can throw the greaseproof paper on the window panels and soften the light, and it doesn't cost a lot. Here at the Filmic, we often give nicknames to our equipment. So what do we call this stuff? Over to Richard.
Well, it's called Greaseproof Paper. There is a musical and a motion picture called Grease. The main character in Grease is called Danny Zuko. So how about Danny? For example, yo, throw me over it, Danny. Yes, that works.
So what if we need to diffuse more light? The greaseproof paper isn't massive, so we have a few other cheap DIY and super low budget methods. If you don't already have a 5-in-1 reflector, get one. They are really cheap and can be used in a million different ways. It has a white film, a negative film, a silver sheen, and a hip-hop music video mode. In terms of diffusion, if you remove the cover, you have a large transparent panel. With something bigger, you can create distance between the light and the panel, which makes the light even softer. We also use one of these bags from IKEA. You can peg it onto a light stand or a mic stand, like we do. This one is super lightweight and is always in my line 5. If you need something bigger, a shower curtain is the way to go. This one is frosted, so it works really well. It doesn't need a big area to be set up, but you can easily fit 3 800 watt lights behind it and blast soft light into your scene. Thanks for watching. If you like the techniques we used in this episode, let us know in the comments below, and also let us know about the diffusion methods you use to diffuse your light. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and
All right. I want to go back and answer the question answer the question asked before around hard light versus soft light. As you can see here, this is an example of something without and with. Now, the look on the right might be something that you want, might be what you're intending to do with this. As I said, an example of an interview sequence or someone's going to be tortured or being captured in someone's basement. It might be something you want, and that's fine. And if that's the intention, then go with that intention. But if that's not the intention, then this is going to look out of place. Without the diffusion, it's going to look bad. It's not going to suit this. So it depends depends on what you're trying to achieve, but there has to be intentionality to it, and you have to do it. So, uh, one of the things that I personally use in life is using a shower curtain. It's it's relatively cheap, like $15, and all you need to do is just hang it anywhere in front of a source of light, and it becomes like a very huge source. Whether it's the sun, whether it's another lamp you have at home that is quite strong and bright, whatever it is. Any questions? Hello?
I think you can go on. I don't think anybody has any questions right now.
Okay. All right. There's another one that I would like to show you, and then we're going to jump into some examples. And this basically describes how not to rely on any artificial light, using the sun as your main source. It's a little bit long, but it's definitely.